One more question for you, which I think is important, and I wrote it down because it's really part of you, this idea of vertical development work in organizations. So I know it's very important to you. What does that mean? What does it look like, vertical development? I'm really curious.
Well, maybe I'll say it in terms of our, body of work in organizational psychology. So 20 years ago, the main approach was you could think of now as a sort of cognitive behavioral intervention. Hey, executive, when you're yelling at Mary, it shuts Mary down. It would be better if instead of yelling behavior A, you would ask an open-ended question, behavior B, and why don't you try that? And that leader would probably ask Mary a question once or twice, and within 2 or 3 weeks, they would revert to yelling at them because that was their default mode. And we started to understand, largely guided by the innovative work of Chris Ardress at the Harvard Graduate School of Education, that you had to not just look at the action someone was taking, but what Chris called the frame or the mindset, McKinsey would later call it. It's like looking at the paradigm that somebody's holding that's making that behavior obvious and inevitable. And that if you were able to help somebody shift their mental model, you might get a more sustained change. But as we can hear now with the trauma-informed lens, all of that's a lot of mental change. It's all cognitive intervention. And it turns out it's pretty short-lived. It's not a sustainable sea change of the way someone's being and their
Mm,
default behavioral repertoire. If you want to get that, you have to go much deeper and start looking at in the terrain that we've been talking about, Alexander. You have to explore long-held emotions, fundamental root fears that shape people's perceptions and interpretation systems for making sea change of the way someone's being and their
mm.
default behavioral repertoire. If you want to get that, you have to go much deeper and start looking at in the terrain that we've been talking about, Alexander. You have to explore long-held emotions, fundamental root fears that shape people's perceptions and interpretation systems for making meaning of their life, their quality of trust and openness. You talked about how safe do people feel on the team. Some of that safety has to do with what's actually happening on the team, and some of that safety has to do with what safety does that executive ever know life is. What
Yeah.
safety are they walking into the room with? So we have to go to core fears. We have to go to unmet needs. We have to go to the tenderest parts of their unprocessed grief in their life in order to free them up to then be able to make a mental shift to then produce a different automatic behavior. So vertical development, the reason it's important to me is that I think it points us towards the most profound change work. And change work at that level is healing work. And that just touches my heart very much. And it's also a source of great hope for me, because I think until we have permission to work at that level, we're going to be ineffective because we're not actually at the level of the cause. We're at the level of the symptoms on the surface. And I feel like currently, as practitioners, we're beginning to get an invitation to work at the roots of the tree.